Hey there, Ross.
Hey, how are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you today?
Yeah, all good. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. I'm curious since I know you do a lot of different types of work with AI, and we're going to talk about that in a bit. What's the first time
Hmm.
you made something with AI that made you think, wow, this is going to change how I'm going to create?
Mid-Journey 2022 was the first time I used a text-to-image model.
Huh.
And I can't remember what image I created at the time, but I remember making something or creating an image with text, with a prompt. Seeing that I was able to produce something that looked like what the prompt said, that really, it shifted something in me. And so it's been 3 years since then. And yeah, since then, I still get the same feeling every time. Maybe not every time, but whenever I am creating something with this technology, I think because I come from a technical background, I have a background in development, and I've always had a computer in front of me. So understanding the progression of what that means to be able to produce an image or produce something that looks like something else from a visual perspective using only a line of what could be English or Japanese or Chinese really blew my mind. Yeah, I can remember it was at the time I was doing stop motion animation with paper. I was into origami and origami art at the time. So I think one of the first images I ever created was an origami cat or something. And it didn't look much like an origami cat because at the beginning of when these diffusion models started showing their head, which was around mid 2022, they weren't great. But the fact that you could do that really, I think what it did to me, it did to a lot of people. And it's just been a complete obsession of mine ever since.
Nice. And I bet you get those moments a lot even now as soon as something new comes out and you get to see another new workflow. For me, more recently, it was just, I think it was after seeing some of your posts, I was like, instead of having all these different tabs, trying all these different models for a prompt, and then taking the best one and taking it to Photoshop and spending hours and hours and days sometimes trying to fix it and make it seem like what I had in mind, now I can do that by
Mm.
chaining together models. I can test them all in one
Mm.
go and then chain the best
Mhm.
together to actually make these small tweaks. And I don't spend as much time in Photoshop anymore, which is mind blowing to me because I felt that the only way you can get from what's AI generated to something that's for a real client or a real audience is by brushing up on Photoshop skills and then spending all these hours to composite and harmonize. And people even called it like AI fine tuning a couple of months ago.
Mm.
And now I'm doing so much less of that.
If you look at, just on that note, if you see what Google have just released now with this, that's going crazy on socials at the moment, this Nano Banana, not a very forgettable name, so I think they've done well there. But
Yeah.
the fact that you can, with natural language, just prompt in what you don't want to see, what you do want to see, change the color, change the shape, change everything, put this person there, move this backwards. That is, I think, where we are now with the tech, I think is where a lot of people thought we were going to be about 2 years ago,
Right.
myself included. I assumed that it was going to get there a lot faster. But the
Right.
fact that we are there now and it is happening, it's quite interesting to see because the sky's the limit, right? I think
Yeah.
that going forward, all that can really get better is it can just become easier and easier for you to create and easier for you to manipulate, composite, harmonize, as you say. Yeah, interesting time to be around with all this tech.
For everyone else watching, what was the first time AI genuinely surprised you as a creator? Just drop that in the comments so that we can go back and look and feel like you're part of that journey with us because as you can see, Ross and I have had a lot of those moments. Welcome back to Beyond the Prompt. This is where I go live with creatives to go beyond the tools hype, to talk about real workflows, to create real work, be they ads, social content, and films. My name is Sana. I run a studio called Imaginoo. We're an AI enhanced studio that helps fragrance, beauty, and wellness brands create scroll stopping content and product visuals, which is why when I saw Ross's posts, it was clear he's not just showing me another tool. He's showing me how I could get my work done so much faster in a way that's a lot more intuitive, a lot more fun, and opens up much more of my time and brain space. Ross, quickly to introduce you, you are the co-founder of Zen Robot, which helps marketers, agencies, and creatives use AI to produce content that's both innovative and client ready. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah.
You've posted some interesting workflows lately, so I thought a good way to start would be to hand over the controls to you and say, hey, share a couple of your favorite examples that made you stop and say, okay, this is why it's worth going beyond one model at a time using Weavy, a node-based system.
I'm just going to take you through what Weavy is, whether you have seen or heard about it before. It is a node-based application which allows you to basically produce, if you have done any generative AI content creation in the form of images or videos or using large language models, you'll be familiar with a lot of these terms, a lot of the models that are built into it. For the most part, I think that this is the step after you start dabbling with a lot of these tools. The reason I say that is because a lot of the models, some of them that I'm going to go through now, it makes more sense for you to try them outside of a tool like this first with the tools that are available. Whether you are using Midjourney and GPT or Gemini and Whisk, there's 100 different ways of going about generating content these days. Weavy becomes almost a, I see it as the sort of Photoshop version of what a lot of these other tools have done, where they're all siloed, where it's brought everything together and you've got all the tools available under one roof. The basic idea, very simple, intuitive interface. There's a little search functionality. We've got most used tools that I've had access to recently. And you've got this little toolbox section over here, which I'm not going to go through all of these, but as you can see, as I'm scrolling down, if you had to go through all of these, you'd understand what some of these do, which if you're a designer or an illustrator, or you have used some sort of animation or compositing or video tools before, some of these would intuitively make sense to you. Painter is obviously going to be something that paints naturally. You've got crop, composite, and then there's a whole bunch of other tools that are available here. With the text tools, these are essentially bringing in the large language models. If I grab the prompt box and I drop it in there, it then has a little pre-prompted thing, and this essentially is a node. This node I can now connect to a series of other nodes. This is another image model that I've just put it in. I'm going to illustrate what's possible. You've got this prompt node. From the prompt node here, I can either drag, this is me now holding the option key, and then it brings up a list of everything that's available here. This is a quick access. The other option, or the other way of going about it, is if I do have a prompt, let's scroll down to the image models. Now, if you are familiar with generating content with AI, particularly images, some of these models, or most of them, depending on how much you've been in the space before, some of these will be recognizable. We've got Imagen 4, GPT-1 image, there's Flux. What you won't see here is Midjourney. Midjourney is its own closed system. It doesn't have any, what they refer to as API access. Anything that does allow its own API open allows for a tool like Weavy, or there's a series of other tools. There's Leonardo, there's Crea, there's Memento. There's a lot of tools that have built via what these APIs are. These big models or these big tools have released the API for public use, and they can then be built directly into this. That's what allows these models to have the ability for you to use them in a tool like this. We've got, if I just wanted to drop this in, now this is an image node. In this image node here, I have got the ability to pull in a prompt, and then you've got a negative prompt in this case. Negative prompting, I'm not going to get too much into, but it's basically what you don't want to see in an image. If you've done any diffusion-based stuff before, you'll understand what that is. But for the most part, I've got this over here. I'm just going to say let's do a product. Let me zoom in here. Product shot of a pair of sneakers against a white background. Okay, so this becomes my prompt. Now, this essentially, if you've used Midjourney before or any of the other tools, this essentially would be in the prompt box. So this now allows me to have this prompt here, which I can now run to the prompt box. Cool. I've got this here. There are settings which are available on the side here. So I can tell it which aspect ratio I want, the seed, which I'm not going to get too much into, and how many credits. What is nice about this tool is it tells you exactly how many credits are being used for the different models that you are working with. The reason it does that is because it can't get, I don't think it's possible at this stage for a company or a tool or a platform like Weavy, for example, to give you access to all of these tools available and then charge you a flat rate. And that's purely because, for example, some of the image generation tools are a lot more intensive and they require a lot more computing. So naturally, it's going to be more expensive to create it. It'll tell you here, this is going to use 6 credits. I run the model, and it then looks at this prompt via this little prompt box. It's got a little sort of timer there saying a little percentage how far it is and what it's going to do with that. While that runs, I've dropped an external image in. With this image I generated in Midjourney, and I can do a series of activities with this as well. This is now loaded. Here we've got our product shot. We didn't specify it's Nike. I think naturally when you think, I saw an ad the other day, when you think of a pair of sneakers, it naturally has a big Nike tick or Nike swish on it. It's interesting that it's done that, even though we haven't asked for it. Now I've got this image, okay, in the same way that I've got the image at the bottom, but I can now take this result and I can say, okay, I know that there is a background removal tool. So I've got replace background, remove background. Let's try this. Is Stable Diffusion's model. This, if you've ever used Photoshop before, is essentially just clipping out the subject and then removing the background so that you can have a PNG. This layer now becomes something that you can use by itself. Now we've got the image that we've prompted, and we have this pair of shoes. Let's say we want to put these pair of shoes into this has got a compositing tool. The compositor essentially is, this is like a very basic version of, let's call it Canva and maybe not Photoshop. So we've got layer 1 and layer 2. So here we have this compositor. I can now edit this, and now we can go and change and shift and do whatever we want to with this, which is handy. If you have used Photoshop before, this is very rudimentary. It's just basically laying out in a very simple way the product or the image that you want. So you could move this around, do whatever. So just as a test, I think we'll move these, make them a little bit smaller, place them over there. That's my compositor.
It's good for that initial concepting, like of where something should live.
Exactly. Where this becomes very powerful though is if I want now, so I've got my product, but if I wanted to create the second product, so if I take this product, I want to now remove the background. So I've got the option to duplicate this. So that's just me duplicating that there. I run that into this model. Now it's not going to, obviously not going to be the shoes. It's not going to remove the background of, this is the same background removal tool. What I've done there is just a little hack. It's not by any means the best way of doing it, but it is one way of going about it. So now we've got our second product. So now I can take this image and I can put that in as the background image there, and now it drops that into this block here. So essentially this becomes a sort of transparent PNG. So you've got basically this open space in here. And I think this is a concept, what I'm about to go into now is a concept that is, I think, quite native to AI image generation, which is painting essentially, but you have in painting and out painting, which if you've used Photoshop before, generative is a in painting and an out painting tool. If you take an image, you drop it into Photoshop and you crop around the edges. So you make the canvas wider and you leave the image the same size that it is. On the outsides of that image, the band that is not filled in, when you hit generative fill, it brings up a little prompt box and says to you, what do you want to type? What do you want to fill this with? A lot of the time, I just leave it empty and it just fills it with whatever. It's just to expand the background essentially. And essentially that is called painting because it is looking at contextually what the image itself in the middle is contains in terms of the visual aesthetic, the lighting, the subject, and it then paints on the outside of it relative to what is on the inside, what it feels is going to be the best surrounding. Sometimes it's just expanding it so that the white area or the black area or the jungle or forest or ocean area just expands out. But it always keeps context based on what is left in the image. That's out painting. In painting is when you've got the image, you have a little section masked out or erased out. Whatever you prompt into that section, that is painting it into the model itself. So in this case here, this would be a combination of out painting and in painting because we've got the exposed areas that don't have anything in the background. So we're going to put this image essentially into a background. Okay. So we've got the output, and a model I like to use is, I use Flux a lot of the time. It has so many of these models. Actually, you know what? Let's just do this and we'll do Relight. Okay, so Relight takes in the image, looks at this image, and it will require a prompt. And the prompt, I will just be text, and I'll say the products in the jungle, and run this model. So while we wait for this, if I've done this correctly, it should essentially paint these products into a jungle scene. I might also have to put a background in and composite it in and then blends the layers in, but let's just test if this actually does. Also, with a lot of these nodes that are available, it's important to understand that you've really just got to try and test as many of these as possible. I have, through trial and error and just reading and manipulating and changing and trying to understand what actually happens when you run different models. As I've said, Flux has 1,000 of them. Relight does something different. But if you're a Photoshop creator and you see what's just happened here, you can see how powerful something like this is.
It's added it to background. It's composited it beyond just to copy paste. There's actually shadows. It's relit, as this name suggests, the bottle itself. So the lighting is not glaring from the right hand side. Actually, the light source looks like it is coming from the sky as it would in a jungle. There's so many things there that it's done, which would take a lot of time to do manually in Photoshop.
And you can see it, like you say, it's relit. If you look at the bottle here, compared to here, it hasn't just made it darker and changed the lighting slightly. It's actually done quite a lot of, it's added shadows. It's done a lot of work here. Now, is this product ready? Is this ready to ship? That's entirely up to you. For social media ads, if you're trying to do basic product placement, I think there's nothing wrong with that. What I like about a workflow similar to this is, let's see what happens if we move this bottle. So if I take the bottle, we want the bottle to be a bit smaller. Maybe we want it to be relative to the size of the shoes. Maybe we want to make the shoes a little larger. We want to move them over there. We want to put the shoes in front of the bottle. And we want this guy like over there, make him a little bit bigger. Cool. Okay, so now we've recomposited what this looks like. All I need to do now is run the model again, if provided we do want the products in the jungle still. And it's going to look at what this layout looks like, and then it's going to repaint, or it's going to relight this using outpainting and inpainting. In this case, essentially would be inpainting. And yeah, we'll see. Is it going to be exactly the same? Chances are it's not going to be exactly the same in terms of what the jungle looks like. That's another thing with generative AI. Like every time you prompt something, it is going to be different. By nature, it is just like that. Now that looks to me a lot better like a product sort of placement. The products themselves are a bit more, they look like a lot more real because of the size. So look, I can spend hours on this. I could do this in Photoshop. Photoshop has a harmonize feature or harmonize tool, which has just come out in Photoshop Beta, which does something quite similar. So I would need to find the background or generate this background, this jungle background, put it in the background, have the layers of the shoes with the tree stump and this sort of serum bottle in the background, place them in there and then harmonize until it works. And then adjust the shadows and adjust the editing. But the reality is, if this is for a banner ad or something that's going to be placed on a website where you're trying to sell either the shoes or the product itself, honestly, I feel like it flies. I think it works. Right. You are going to get perfectionists who are going to zoom in and say, oh, but it doesn't have this kind of quality. If you are generating out of home, massive billboard style banners, it's a very different story. Then you would need like really high resolution images, which you can get using AI tools. It's just not as reliable and it takes a lot more work. So maybe in that case, you are going to need to hire a photographer and go shoot the shoes and move them around. Again, this whole story of AI replacing people, I don't fully buy into it. I think it is definitely going to be a challenge for a lot of people who don't understand how to use it. But for the most part, photographers are still going to be around for a while. So not to worry too much. So yeah, that is a very basic workflow. It was me riffing as I was going along. But this is essentially how a tool like Weavy works. There's another tool called Flora, which does something quite similar. I just love Weavy because it's got all the tools that I know and understand built in. I like how it's laid out. Their community and their Discord channel is absolutely amazing. They do tutorials. There's a gent named Ite who does all of the tutorials. They find a new workflow, they put something out on Discord, and they just explain it. And the community is very active. They're like, hey, I tried this, didn't work. Could you talk me through how you went about creating this? So very active community, really nice people. I just really enjoy the tool as well as the community and the people themselves. So really
awesome. And what I found was different for Weavy versus I am using another node-based platform is that it actually keeps the past generations within the same workflow. So if you felt, hey, something didn't work in this second one, let me go back to the first one and rework it and link it with other models, it's easier to do here.
Yes, it does definitely have benefits like that, which is great.
Let's talk about people for a second, because a lot of people are tired of having AI images that have the same static expressions, or the expressions are a little bit hard to tweak. And I know you had this great post today, which people should check out, of how to actually get more emotions through your prompts in Midjourney. But you also had something you wanted to show us here about how you can use a single image and pull out a whole range of emotions from it. Can you walk us through that one?
Yeah, for sure. There's a couple of things going on here. So I just have a prompt box. Now in the prompt box, you'll notice that from a prompting perspective, this looks quite code-esque. Now, there's a reason for that. This is referred to as JSON, J-A-S-O-N, that word over there. Don't worry too much about what it is or what it means. It is just a It's a type of technology that they use to transport data across different platforms on the internet. Websites speaking to databases, passing data to larger data sources, and just structuring it in a way that was a lot more, I think, easier to read than what you would refer to as a CSV file or a comma separated value file, which you could import into any cell-based tool like Google Sheets or Excel or any of those. So the reason I like to use JSON prompting, it does not, and anyone who tells you otherwise is an absolute liar, don't listen to them, but it does not make the image any better than a normal text prompt. What it does do from a legibility perspective is it allows you to, as I'm scrolling down here, you can see it's got like object, it's got all these curly braces and type. That's not what you need to worry about. What is interesting about it is as you scroll down, it says here size, life size framing, position, centered, looking directly at camera, material. So as you go down here, it's almost got these, what they refer to in coding as key value pairs. So you have a key, which the key is surface texture, okay? And the value is fine line, soft pores, whatever. So what this allows me or anyone using this, and this is why I like doing it, maybe this is just because of how I think, but it's way easier for me to look at this and go, okay, if I want to make a change, one subtle change to this, where would I change for example, the person from a man to a woman? I'm like, okay, type, portrait of a beautiful Spanish woman. Okay, in her mid-50s, cool. So now I know that's the bulk of the object, okay, or of the subject. There's the scene, there's the style. It just, when I look at this, it's just way easier for me to see than a paragraph that I have to read like I would be reading a book and then have to spot where I need to make the changes. And when you are generating images using prompts, it's quite important to understand that the prompt, the structure in which the way you've laid the prompt out has nothing to do with how the machine understands it. The machine just looks at keywords, and what order those keywords are in is it's almost irrelevant. But for you to make changes, it's important to have that layout in a way that's easy for you to go in and go, okay, cool, I want to change the accent colors to blue, red, and yellow, for example. Anyway, that's just a little bit about that sort of prompt structure. I know that I get a lot of questions about why do you use JSON prompting, or what does it mean, or how is it better than any other way? It's not better or worse, it just makes it more structured.
I think I could have used this last night. I was testing the Quen model last night, and I got this perfect image, but then the image had an Asian man. And that particular company was actually a men's hair care company in the US. Majority of their clients are Caucasian. And every time I would try to change it in Quen or anything else from an Asian man to a Caucasian man, the distance of the spray nozzle from the hair, because it's actually for hair loss, it had to be just right, and then the nozzle needed to have this mist that's coming just right. It would change. Somehow it looked like a perfume bottle, like he's spraying it into his forehead instead. And so I was like, why can I not change this one thing very easily? And finally, a lot of workarounds later, I got it right. And not in Quen, by the way. But this might have been useful to test within Quen and perhaps get just that race change very quickly rather than having to change composition.
For that example that you had there, I think it's also important to know that sometimes you've got to know the limitations of the tools, but those can only be known and learnt over time. So you know that, okay, cool, I'm going to try and do this in Midjourney. Do it in Midjourney, doesn't work, and then you're like, okay, let's move to Google's Imagen 4 or ChatGPT's image generation tool or ideogram, and understanding what each of those tools is better at and how much faster you can get a result, I think is more valuable than pushing until you can get a specific result. I think it's natural for us to try and, we as humans, that's what we're designed to do. We just, no, we can't give up. But a lot of the time it has less to do with giving up and just knowing that there are limitations within these tools. So yeah,
this is always a
it's just one of
conclusion
those
at the
things.
end of these 2 a.m. sessions, but still,
Yeah,
it goes without
exactly.
pain to learn.
Exactly, as long as you're learning. Anyway, so we've got our prompt box here, and that's produced. I use the GPT image generation tool, which is basically just ChatGPT or OpenAI's image generation tool. It's very good. I think it uses a slightly different technology what a lot of the other tools do. But for the most part, this was, for testing purposes, perfect for what I was trying to achieve. Okay, so I've got Spanish woman in her 50s. Again, if I specified that she has a gray strand of hair, her lipstick is slightly more pink, her eyes are blue. These are not details I put in here, but if I did want to add that, I could go in there and add those things in here, and it makes it quite easy and straightforward. Anyway, so I generated this image, and I thought, okay, just to see what's possible in terms of generating some sort of emotion through video. I tested it using Minimax. I think there were two reasons I used Minimax. One, because it was slightly cheaper than the rest of them. So it only uses 60 credits as opposed to some of these models use up to 600 credits. I know VO uses 600. Now, if you've only got 1,400, that's 2 videos worth, and then I'm done. So you have to really pick your battles here. But it's also understanding what you're trying to get out of this and what you're using the tool for. Anyway, so I dropped this model in, and I've done it for 4 of these videos. But now a snapshot of this, you can see I've got one image here which is connected to all of these. Okay, so this is the base image, and if I change this base image, all of these would update if I have to run them again. But what doesn't change is I say the woman is laughing, so I've got this as the prompt. So this prompt is now going into the Minimax video along with the first frame. So a lot of these video models rely on, not always, but if you want consistency, you need to have a starting image or a first keyframe. You have that first keyframe in here, and then you run the prompt, and that's what was achieved with that, which is great. I thought it did a pretty good job of, is she laughing? Yes, she is. The woman is laughing. There you go. So that's one option there. Now I could run it again and again until I got better results or different results, but depending on what you're using it for. And another thing with video prompts, it's quite tempting to want to add more detail into it. I haven't specified anything about the camera angle or what the camera movement should be, or does she laugh and then start crying. In a 5-second clip, you're not going to get all of that detail. So just from my personal experience and also what we teach in our masterclass is try and stick to as basic as possible a short prompt with a starting image, with a keyframe at the beginning. Because what that helps you do is, if you do want to change the emotion in the image, try and get the emotion in the image first and then translate that into the video. It's just a little tip there. So here we have the woman is crying. So all I've done is run the same image into this new box, and she's definitely crying. Same lady. If on close inspection you can see there's some strange things going on with the mouth a little bit, but that is from a piece of text and an image, right? Like, to me, that is rather impressive. Mm-hmm. This one is the woman is angry and shouting. This one didn't go as well as planned. She really is going for it there, huh? And I think that has a lot to do with, this was made a while ago. This was probably about 2 months ago. And I think that, as you can see, like the mouth gets quite strange. As soon as there's a lot of motion in these video tools, naturally they are struggling to just deal with it because there's so many different ways. It has to adhere to physics and maths, and there's a lot of stuff going on here. So to me, this is forgivable. And I think that going forward, particularly with VO3, which is Google's video model, like, it's really impressive what you're able to create. Yeah. So that one didn't work amazingly well. This one, I said the woman is closing her eyes with a smile on her face. And it nailed that. Closed her eyes and she started smiling. So just sticking to the basics. As you can see here, the prompts that I've put in here are very, very basic. Where the hard work comes in, or where most of the work comes in, is getting your base image. And getting the base image comes from the prompt. So it always comes down to the prompt. It comes down to how well are you able to articulate and how much context are you able to give, relevant context, not just context, but how much context are you able to give the model so that it can produce an image as close to what you have in your head as possible. Now, there's also so many different ways of going about this. I use ChatGPT a lot to help me because I'm not that good at, and I don't think anyone is. What I've come to realize, it's actually being able to describe in as close to natural language as possible what you are seeing. So when you are, I think I mentioned this in the post I posted this morning about the emotions. I said that try and think about what you are seeing as opposed to what the person is feeling. Okay, so if I look at this image, maybe with the lady laughing, like the difference between what we can see, the machine doesn't know that she's laughing. We've just said woman is laughing. Those are the two keywords it's looking at, woman and laughing. And the other keyword it's looking at, it's not a word, but it's an image. So it's got image driving this, which is a video model. And the two keywords are woman and laughing. It's looking in its database, and it's not looking for happy people. Okay, it's not looking for people that are having a good time. It's looking for what other videos and images are attached to women and are attached to laughing. And then it is, in its best way possible, bringing those together to form something that is acceptable by the person trying to create it. That is essentially how it's working. The machines don't know whether it's laughing or crying or jumping or flying at all. So being able to articulate and being able to express from a text perspective and using visuals what you want to see on the screen is an important skill. And it's this new skill, this new way of us as humans trying to explain what we are seeing. And it does feel like, yes, we're telling the machine what to do and we've got to think like a machine. But I think we have to think like this new entity, which is man and machine. But also understanding that you're thinking about it from a visual perspective. So if you can think like a photographer, a videographer, a filmmaker, a director. Directors sit behind the cinematographer and they say, okay, we want this man to run in from the left-hand side. He's then going to jump over the box. He's going to land on the other side of the canyon, and then he's going to climb into a plane and fly away. Like, a human understands that, but you've got to now explain in as much physical detail as possible what the person is wearing, how fast they're running, what's happening to their hair, what's happening to their clothes, what's happening to their face. Not that the happy person is running across the canyon.
Right.
It's like in physical detail what is going on there. So very different way of us trying to explain how these things work, but is a new language or a new dialect that is forming.
Now, did you have another deep dive you want to show us, or was that already covered with the last example of how to go from
I've got a few. If we've got time, I can show you one more.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, so this is quite a big one. But when you, at face value, you look at this and you're like, what the hell is going on here? But once you take it down to, okay, cool, let's just start with node number one. And I think that explaining it like this with prompting as well, instead of trying to prompt the entire image or the entire video at once, break it down into small pieces. Just be like, what am I trying to achieve here? What is the subject? In this case, we have a coffee cup. Okay, cool. I want the coffee cup. What do I want the coffee cup to do? So I want to end with a social media ready advert that has a piece of text on it. Okay, so that's the end goal. But I can't get there from where I'm sitting now. So you have to build on it and you have to understand, okay, cool, let's go through the process of doing that. And that's exactly what this is here. So I've got a coffee cup, which is just an image I imported from Midjourney. Did the same thing as we did earlier, which was getting rid of the background. I then went into the compositor and I tilted it a bit and just put it slightly to the side. I then used a prompt box and ran it says any LLM, and I think I chose, yes, so I chose ChatGPT in this case. So I just wanted it to describe the image, which is attached here. And this basically just, I could have done this in one prompt. I just wanted to put it into a prompt box just to see exactly how this sort of layout worked. So this is essentially giving a full breakdown and making it a lot more elaborate in terms of what the details are, what the decor is, where the focus must be, the colors, etc. Okay, so this I'm now using as the driving image, which is going to be this image here. I did adjust that slightly to make it stand correctly again. We've got our little relight feature over here. So I brought this prompt into relight and it's now done. That looks like smoke, so it should be steam, but you get the idea. But it's completely relit what this cup looks like. So now we have our base image, which is, okay, cool. This is where my head was going. I thought, okay, I want this, but now I also want to make sure that I have this available for both portrait as well as landscape. So I ran the Stable Diffusion outpainting, and all I had to do with this was extend the right and left side. So exactly what we were saying about in Photoshop, if you have to expand or crop out, it basically just fills that in. So it's taken that square image and it's just filled in the sides over here, intuitively just looking at that. So now I've got my wide angle shot. So think about if you're trying to create thumbnails for YouTube, but you're also trying to create reels or TikTok videos. This is where this becomes quite handy. You can do everything all in once. Now you could do this in Photoshop, in After Effects, or whatever you wanted to, but it just makes it easier for you to be able to see all of these and make updates and changes to one image, which is going to update the final one over there. I then pulled this into the outpaint to make it portrait. So this is now just doing the opposite of what this one's doing, painting above and below. These results then went out into another block. And what I did here is I ran a little text prompt. I said, I want a text-only image with the copy. Coffee will always be the answer, written in a white retro font. I used GPT's image here. I did try it with ideogram, but ideogram made it a little too designed. I essentially just wanted the copy. Honestly, you could just have written this out. I'm just not really good with typography, and I know that ChatGPT is probably better from a typography perspective than what I am. Is this perfect typography? No, it's not. Definitely not, but it gets the point across. So I could have just used this as a stamp, as an image on the top, but I thought it would be cool to see what it would look like with the background removed. So I've got this as my background image. I've got the compositor. And if I edit this here, I can now move this to wherever. So now you've got a little canvas style or Figma style image, which allows you to create whatever you want to here. So let's say this was my little coffee shop. Coffee is always the answer. This could be a little Instagram reel, something or other. I run it into, let me just see where I went here. Oh, what I also did, so this was the second example that I did. I created the second image over here, but I placed our Zen Robot, which is my company's logo. I wanted to place that onto the coffee cup itself. So I said, place the logo image onto the coffee cup. It then took that image there, placed the Zen Robot logo directly onto the image, which I think is, again, Sana, I'm sure you've tried to place logos onto t-shirts or products. You that like doing something like that to make it look as real as this is quite a challenge.
Yeah. Also, book covers, the place it mock-up was my best friend until AI showed up.
Yeah, exactly. I remember that. So now we've got our little Zen Robot coffee cup. It's got steam coming out. So I thought, let's see what would happen if I animated this. So I eventually took that, I outpainted it to make it top and bottom, put it in the compositor with coffee is always the answer. And then I used Seed Dance. So Seed Dance is just another one of the video tools available. The prompt was still shot of coffee steam rising up from the cup slowly. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Nice.
Very simple.
What are they called? Instagram story.
A little story, a little, maybe you doing some sort of inspirational post about, I don't know, Zen Robot coffee or whatever. So again, for social media content, like I love these workflows. I love how easy and quick it is to iterate. And now that you have a basic understanding of how all of this works, if I wanted to go change the coffee cup, I just have to go here, update that, run all these again, and it'll basically just update everything. Now, if you think about how long that would take from an assets perspective, and the client says, oh, we love this, can you just please go change that? And you're like, oh, I've got to change 15 of these. We've got to change the aspect ratio, change this, change that. It just becomes very difficult. Where if you're stepping through each of these, you're just running each model until you get the right one or the one that you want, until you have a finished product here that you're happy with. And you can do multiple iterations. And this is where something like this becomes very powerful and just fun. It's just fun to see all of it together and move it around. You can duplicate these workflows. You can hand them to other people. They can create their own. But it is a very new and very intuitive and just, like I say, fun way of working.
Awesome. Wonderful. Hey, that's a super powerful walkthrough. I had a couple of questions I wanted to ask you just to bring some of this home. I know you touched on this already in your response to my long love affair with Quinn last night, but how do you choose the best AI model for each task?
The best is always relative to what it is you're trying to achieve. If, for example, I've got another workflow here, which I can show you. I created all of these images in, I think some of them were in Midjourney, and I like these little tilt shift isometric style things. It's just part of what I enjoy creating, these little miniature worlds. And I just know personally that some of them, from a video perspective, would be better using different models. As you can see here, I use Seed Dance for this one, and this has got this guy surfing. Again, I was just testing it out. Pixverse, which I hadn't used before, did a pretty good job of that. I tried it with Seed Dance, same thing. I just know that Luma usually does a pretty good job with this sort of stuff, depending on what style you're trying to create. As you can see, like all three of them have created something quite different. So this was a showcase. But to answer your question, like which one does better, it really comes down to testing. It comes down to what it is you're trying to achieve. I find that with Luma or Dream Machine, having the subject in the middle and then doing rotate around it, because Luma has got camera settings, basically camera motions and movements built into it. So you can say orbit around, pedestal up, tracking, slow zoom, that sort of thing. So it just makes it a bit more intuitive from someone who has never done photography or videography before to create something like that. To answer your question, how do you pick the best one? You've got to literally just go through all of them, depending on what it is you're trying to create. But instead of trying to dive in and be like, okay, for this project, I need to test all of them, test the ones that you've worked with, push it to the limits. I know it goes against what I said earlier, but push it to as far as you can get and then try something else. That's the only way you can see what the crossover is. Otherwise, you're just blindly going in multiple directions, which most people are. They're like, oh, there's this new tool. I need to try it out, need to try it out. And at the end of the day, it's like you just
I'm not far enough along. I don't know all of them. I'm not quite ready to ship, and some of that happens. Or, yeah.
totally, exactly. I don't know all of them. The new ones that come out, I give 10, 15 minutes. And if I find that it's better for certain things, then I replace it. I use that to replace whatever it is I'm using. But that's the only way that you can keep up with it, is just testing when you have time the
Right.
tools as they're coming out.
Gotcha. And then when do you combine them? And why would you combine them? How do you make that decision?
Combining image and video.
Combining the different models with each other. Because in some of your workflows, you did relight with a cutout, in others, you used some other combinations. Now that we have this ability to combine models in a much faster, smoother way than before, which is toggling and downloading and uploading, etc., how does someone new to this begin thinking about when to combine the outputs of various models together?
It's a very good question. I think that if you are new to this and you've never touched anything like Photoshop or Illustrator or any other Adobe Suite or any other application, then pick one tool, pick the ones that are the most popular. You look at Midjourney. I know Midjourney isn't in Weavy, but look at Midjourney and look at Imagine 4, which is Google's image generation tool, and try and work with that to see what's possible with that. Then combining it with other tools, it just depends on what it is you are trying to do. Again, it comes down to working with them and trying to understand that I am going to get this done a lot faster and a lot easier using the tool that I know. And if that tool that you know is Photoshop, for example, then use that tool. I think there's also, because we've had this uprising of AI tools, everyone's like, well, we might as well get rid of all the old tools. But the reality is, I still go back to After Effects. Every single animation project or video project I do, I use After Effects. I use CapCut sometimes as well, but I Photoshop regularly. And it's because I know, even if it's just a small little thing, like I know it has all these background removal tools. There's 3 or 4 of them, but I still will drop an image into Photoshop and remove the background like that. Why? Because it's faster for me. I don't have to think about which tool to use. So that's just, I think that's a valuable piece of advice in terms of when you are starting out, but also going forward, just understanding that traditional tools or the tools that you know already or applications that you know already might get the job done a little bit faster. And if it is faster, it's probably because you know it a lot better. So only until you've really dived pretty deep into what most of the tools are. There's no quick fix for any of this. I could tell you, okay, cool, this is the workflow. You go Midjourney and then you use Flux, and then you go Flux background removal or expand or do whatever. Then you place that into Veo is going to give you this type of video content. There is no set workflow for it. But if you are interested in all of these, like Weavy is an amazing platform to look at because it exposes you to a lot of tools that when you do have a bit of downtime and a bit of credits to play around with and see, okay, what does this do differently to that? And yes, the reality is it costs money to try and test all of these things out. But without breaking the bank, I think you can get a pretty firm understanding of what it is you're trying to do with certain tools and just stacking them on top of each other. I don't intuitively think to myself, okay, I'm going to use this and then this. As I'm working, I will always go to, when I'm generating an image, just out of habit, because I've been using the tool for so long, I will go to Midjourney because Midjourney is the place that I've been working in for so long that I just get it. So I'm like, and if I 3 or 4 prompts, I'm like, okay, it's not really going the direction I want, then I'll maybe move over to, I might come to Weavy then. And within Weavy, I know I've got access to ChatGPT, I've got access to all of Google's Imagine, Flux, all of these tools. So then it's a cool way for me to test. Otherwise, I'll go directly into maybe Ideogram is another good example. But what Ideogram is very good at, which very few people are speaking about actually, is it's got the ability to train a character from one image. And it's very good. It's not quite as good as this Nano Banana that we mentioned earlier, but it's excellent. I just did a project now where I'm doing an ad for our Zen Robot masterclass, and I needed character consistency. And it was so quick for me to just be like, clink, 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 and put the characters in and get consistency across that. So yeah, many ways of going about it, but you've got to be willing to put in the time and a bit of effort.
And for those who are actually, I think, working on social content, one thing that I find particularly helpful is every time we go and start making an offer to a new vertical, like whether it's skincare or hair care or something else, we spend time studying what's working on their socials right now and then recreating our own like cinematic, like slightly better but still on brand guidelines version of it. And in that process, usually different tools and different workflows win. It's different every time. So when I was doing black hair, actually, what was surprising, and this was the Weavy workflow, was Luma Photon did the best job
Mm.
at giving us those shower scenes. Incredible, right? But then to get
Mm.
the product texture, because for black hair, getting that intensive conditioner that looks like your mayo that your mother made, if your mother made mayo in the 90s, is very important. So then Flux Context, a
Mhm.
multi-image, works really well. Now, when we look at skincare or something else, those same models are not necessarily the best. There's different ones. So that's why I like the whole quick testing. It allows me to say, okay, now these two are typically the winners for this type of an ad. So next time I actually have that in terms of these details for the shower scene or details for the product texture, that's what I'm going to rely on and then do my other tweaking in Photoshop, which at this point I'm becoming scary good. So it scares me almost. One question, and this came in my inbox. For creators who stick with free pick because nodes look scary, what do you want to say to them?
I say to them, use FreePick. If FreePick
Okay.
works for you, FreePick has all the models built into it and it's very up to date. I know for a fact that it already has Nano Banana built into it. Whatever works for you. I think that, again, because there is hype and FOMO, they work hand in hand. There's this, you should try this new tool and it's going to be the best. And if you don't use it, you're going to be left out. Then the FOMO sets in, you're like, I better try it, and you waste all your money on buying credits for it, and it's just frustrating. And then a new tool comes out. So I think that you just owe it to yourself to use what works. Don't change because it is trendy. Don't change because it's the latest thing. Just do what works for you. So FreePick is great. I haven't really explored it too much, but I know that it's got all the models that I've tested in other places, particularly in Weavy, and those models work. So what I do find though is if I've got credits in different places and I know that all of them have the same tools available, I will hop over to whatever it is. I'll go, if I look at Weavy, I'm like, okay, I've got a couple of credits here. Where else do I have VO available? VO is expensive in this tool, but I know it's slightly less expensive in Higgsfield, for example. So I use it in Higgsfield because maybe I've got credits there. That's just how I choose to work. And is it ever going to be under one roof? I don't know. It might. I like thinking about efficiency and I like thinking about what's the fastest way for me to create this, but also with the best quality without me having to spend too much time going down that road. But I've been doing this for the last 3 years. So I understand from the ground up what I still think back to tools that I've forgotten about. I'm like, I remember seeing that one thing, and I've got a list of bookmarks where I'm like, that's it. Go in there. And I used for one very small specific thing. And chances are it's been updated after a year or so. So over time, you just learn what works and what doesn't. But if free pick is your game, just use it. Then that's my suggestion.
Gotcha. Ross, this was fantastic. Thanks for breaking down not just the steps, but the thinking behind your workflows. That was really helpful. I
Mm-hmm.
know a lot of creators watching this are going to walk away thinking of all the new possibilities for how they can bring their imagination to life faster and with more control. I know you have a workshop coming up in September. So before we wrap, do you want to tell us real
Mm-hmm.
quickly about who it's for and what they might be able to learn so that people who want to delve in deeper with what the next step would be?
Yeah, of course. So it's the next cohort starts in September. We are running it in September, October, and then November until the end of the year. It is a 4-week masterclass specializing in image generation through to motion and ending off with essentially what is a portfolio ready or handover ready piece of content. And that could be in the form of images or a social media ad, something for a website, or a product ready ad. Some of the work that we've had from our previous students has really been outstanding. And that's so the last day for September, because September starts on Monday, is today. If you head over to zenrobots.ai, that will take you to a page where you can basically just get a pack which gives you all the details and you can see if it is something for you. But if you miss this cohort, then we will release the next dates for October. October signups start in the first week of September. And we will be running this until the end of November at least. But it's a really fun workshop. We have each week broken down. First week is just in basic image generation, understanding the basics of how to produce an image. We use Midjourney as the tool to teach, but that's because Midjourney has been around the longest. But the learnings that you learn there can be translated to pretty much any tool. The second week is consistency in characters and style. In the third week, it's motion. So taking those images, turning them into motion, adding audio, adding music. And then in the last week, you work on your final portfolio piece, which is placing all of it together with something that you could use to pitch an idea, a trailer, or yourself as an AI creator, because
So for
It's, yeah,
film,
look,
ad work, social content, and ad work as well. Who would be the folks who this would be for? This particular.
so we've had people from HR departments who have just got an interest in AI, but our essentially the people that do join the cohort the most are designers, people from development backgrounds as well, but mostly in advertising, the creative space, production, post production, yeah, marketing, that sort of space. It's anyone who wants to generate, I guess, maybe not product ready, but just take their ideas that they've had all this time, and they would have had to rely on a designer and a developer and just a whole bunch of creatives to execute their idea. You now can now do that yourself. And our 4-week course has proven that, because people have just said at the end, they're like, I don't have to ask a creative to do this stuff for me anymore. And it's not to say that they are not trying to take work away from creatives. The reality is we've all been there, right? Like you have this idea and you're like, I need that person to do this thing for me now.
Right.
But you don't need that anymore. You have the tools now, and you have the tools available at your disposal, but you do have to take some time to learn how to do it. With this whole no coding, vibe coding, as they're referring to it as, what I can do now, because I come from a development background, in no time at all, would have taken me weeks to produce as a developer, be it a game or a website or whatever. Yeah, I urge you just to test it out and check it out.
In my prior life, I was in Silicon Valley, and we had this thing where developers, coders, creators used to be like, "Oh, I hate working with founders and business people because they tell me, hey, bring this rock." And we're like, hey, what kind of rock? They're like, any rock. And so we bring them a rock, and they're like, no, not like this. You got to tweak it this way. And so this process, and it's funny, but at the same time, I think what was happening for a lot of people who come from non-creative backgrounds is they have a vision, but they don't know how to translate that in words, even in human communication. They don't know how to
Mm-hmm.
think about how to translate the vision they have in mind. So the process of working with a creative takes lots and lots of back and forth, and often it's
Yeah.
draining emotion, morale, emotions, whatever, because budgets and time is usually short. So I think the value of learning from someone like yourself who has that coding background, who has played with so many of these AI tools, is not so much, hey, what do I learn from Ross today that's going to let me use Nano Banana and all the greatest and latest AI tools right now, but how do you think about how to translate that vision in your mind in a way that machines understand it, so that you can show a creative, hey, this is what I want you to take the last 10-20% there, or even further in terms of
Mm.
polish. Getting those ideas from your mind onto something visual that will help you communicate better than with creatives. If your goal is never to, maybe you don't want to become a filmmaker, you don't want to be the social media person, maybe you are a performance marketer and that's all you want to do, and you just don't understand why every time you go to the creative on your team, it takes you way longer to do that small change that you want, that you think is going to help with ad fatigue. It takes you so much longer. Now, if you take a class like this, you'll understand how to communicate with them better, show them
Exactly.
maybe also things, ideas for what you have, and take it that extra mile for the ads perhaps that perform. Whatever
Yeah.
space or industry you're in, I think learning all of this stuff now is valuable, because as the tools and everything else advances, there's just going to be so much of this you'll have to cover in terms of understanding how to bring that to life. So now's a good time to get started and learn from folks like Ross.
Yeah, exactly. And I also think that, just on that note, we are less about teaching tools and more about teaching workflows and fundamentals of
Yeah.
articulating what you want from the machine. Exactly what we spoke about earlier. I could easily just stand up and go, okay, cool, here's a Mid-Journey course, and I can teach you how to use Mid-Journey. But that's only going to teach you how to use Mid-Journey. It's not going to teach you how to think about, how do I use Mid-Journey plus After Effects or whatever, put it all together to create something that is usable, which
Sure.
is, in our case, an ad or a short story or a trailer of some kind.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ross. And this was Beyond the Prompt. I will see everyone next time. Take care. Bye bye.